So on September 9, Troy is going to be teaching on Celebrate, drawing on themes from the Gospel of Mark. The following week on the 16th, we're going to be talking again from the Gospel of Mark about the idea of connecting, and then the week after is going to be again from Mark on Contribute. Troy was out of town, and so we weren't able to give you a lot of details in Shane's post about what he's going to be talking about. So let me briefly give a little bit of information on Troy's presentation, and then I'm going to spend most of my time talking about the following week, the 16th, when we're going to be talking about Connect. One of the things we see in the Gospel of Mark is that there's lots of people who see Jesus do amazing and miraculous things. But most of the time, people are getting excited about what's been done for them because they're not sick or some other affliction that was weighing them down has been removed. They're not making the jump to realize that these miracles that they're seeing aren't just good news for them. They say something about Jesus, the one who's doing it, right? And ideally what we should be called into as we look at the Gospel of Mark is getting excited about Jesus, right? Valuing him for his own sake, not merely what he can do for us. And that's part of the challenge of celebration, moving beyond just celebrating good things that happen to me and celebrating God for who he is in his greatness and his glory and his splendor. So here are three of the things that can, I think, cause us, that Troy's going to be talking about, to not celebrate God to the fullest. Sometimes the issue is we're just not fully invested, right? We kind of have 1 foot in and 1 foot out, or we're just sort of dabbling with things. And people who aren't fully invested don't celebrate with the same kind of intensity. Sometimes we're just distracted by the wrong things. Our attention isn't on God, right? And that distraction keeps us from giving him due worship. And then third, sometimes we don't realize that we need other people, right? That the celebration of anything and of God most of all is done better when we can do it together, right? As a group of people coming together to celebrate. So those are going to be some of the themes Troy's going to be talking about on the 9th. So on the 16th, the theme is going to be how can we learn about what it means to connect from the Gospel of Mark. And here's going to be the crucial point. If you take a step back and you look at the big picture of Mark, there's something very striking. Occasionally we see Jesus teaching to crowds, and there are a number of instances where crowds flock to Jesus in the book of Mark. But Jesus makes a very intentional decision to select 12 men and spend 3 years of his life with them, helping them to literally be his disciples, people who've been living with him, learning from him, who are going to be the ones to then go and do the same thing after his death as the church begins, right? So Jesus makes a conscious decision not just to focus on one-on-one discipleship and not just to focus on teaching to huge crowds, but to take a small group of people to really invest in them, to try to help them become disciples who are then going to be able to help other people become disciples, right? That's Jesus' very intentional plan, right? And sometimes he's even more intentional than that. I mean, it seems like he may have known that Peter, James, and John were going to play a particularly important role after his death in leading the other disciples. And he, at a number of points, spends additional time just with those 3 people. You might think of this as being somewhat analogous to sort of raising up co-leaders who are going to someday be leading connection groups of their own. That's the context in which the first communion is observed. That's the context where when people had heard Jesus teaching to the crowd and he said things they didn't quite understand or weren't sure how to apply, they would go back in a small group context, they could ask Jesus, well, what did you mean? And they could try to learn more about those things. So as you're talking to your group, here's some things that you can think about. And I've got some more detailed questions and some thoughts on those that you should be receiving in an email. But I think it's good to get people thinking about this. Have they ever, whether in church or in some other context, been in a situation where they were part of a small group of people who were really working hard to achieve a common purpose? I think there's something actually just fun and energizing about being a part of a group of people and everybody's using their different talents and abilities to accomplish a common task that is energizing and fun, even if the goal is completely trivial. So how much more if our connection groups, which are oriented toward things that are of eternal value, could have that same type of feel? Getting people to think about that can help them think about, well, what would it be like for our connection group to be more like that? You can talk, obviously, about some of the examples from the Gospel of Mark, about Jesus' intentional strategy, and then ask people, well, why did Jesus do that? Why focus on small groups? And I think there's just some relational things in terms of our ability to live out the different one another commands of the Bible that you can't do those in a huge crowd, and you can't necessarily even do them in just one-on-one relationships. There's more opportunities for different people to contribute their different spiritual gifts in a small group. There's more opportunity for being accountable and just all kinds of things that I think small groups provide. So as you think through some of the reasons why Jesus would have thought this is possible, I think where this will hopefully lead your group is to some really practical questions. How can we as a group be more like that in the year to come, right? I think groups where people actually spend time together outside of group, whether it's everybody together or more informally, that communicates to people that they really care about each other as people, and they're not just trying to kind of check off one of their cornerstone boxes, must be in a connection group, and sort of do the minimum possible to fulfill the requirement. That they really love and are concerned about other people. And I think that's going to actually be one of the biggest things to talk about. One of the other verses that's going to get used from Hebrews 10 talks about how, in view of just the grace and love Jesus has shown us as our high priest, we need to actually be concerned about how to promote love and good works in other people. And I think there's going to be something just radically different if people don't just think about attending a Bible study or even just attending a small group, but if they show up each week to connection group thinking not just what's in this for me, but how can I help the other people who are here in this group become better followers of Jesus, to know more about His love, to encourage them. Maybe if they've stumbled, to speak a word of grace, a word of encouragement to them. If there's a physical need, to step out and try to meet that. If someone new is in the group, to take the initiative to invite them to lunch or coffee or to try to get together with them. If there's somebody who hasn't been around for a few weeks, to be the one to take the initiative to call them up and see how they're doing. If there's a number of people in the group, not just the leader, who have that type of attitude that they bring to the group, I think it's just going to be absolutely transforming for what the lives of our connection groups are going to be like. As we try to focus on what Jesus' focus seems to have been, Jesus was intent during the time of His public ministry on trying to make disciples who would then be able to go out and help other people become disciples. And He chose small groups as the focus of that making disciples context. So how can we as groups, and then how can people individually make it their priority to try to do that in the year to come?